Internet of Things. It's evolving day by day. Therefore, being a leader in the digital space, it's our responsibility to ensure that we are able to bring forth the youth for global learning. Thank you so much, and we'll do our best in this partnership.
Thank you, everyone. UNESCO MGIP, in collaboration with the National Brain Research Center, Delhi, is pleased to launch the first screening app for dyslexia for teachers. This is available in 5 regional languages, including Telugu, Marathi, Kannada, Hindi, and English. I will now request MGIP's own cognitive neuroscientist and the brain behind the app, Dr. Nandini Chatterjee, to join us on the stage.
Honorable Chief Minister, on behalf of MGIP, I'm delighted to announce this app, which we talked about last year at Tech 2017. As a cognitive neuroscientist, my research showed that children in India who grow up in biliterate learning environments, they learn to read 2 writing systems at the same time, should be assessed in the languages that they learn in. And we did not have an app in Indian languages. So we took the research further to develop an app which could be available for children in Indian languages, particularly for teachers. And sir, as you very rightly pointed out, for us, English is another language which is part of the Indian Constitution. And therefore, this app also has English. And I'm delighted to share with you the fact that this will be the first online screening app for teachers that is going to be available free for teachers to download and use to be able to pick up children with dyslexia. So why are we so worried about dyslexia? What many of you might not know is 1 in 10 brains is wired differently. Which means you can quickly, if you do a search of numbers, if there are 500 people in this room, 50 of us are certainly wired differently and may not pick up reading skills as easily as others do in the classroom. We now know that dyslexia is also one of the biggest reasons for school dropout. So though we might have large enrollments, how do we ensure that our children stay in school and acquire basic skills of literacy? Last year, when Anantha and I visited Andhra Pradesh to set up this collaboration, we recognized a champion very early on in the Chief Minister who very quickly agreed to set up the first school for difference learners in the Asia-Pacific region. It was talked about earlier too. And that's when we made a commitment that we would develop very soon an app for Telugu, which would be available. And so, sir, I'm delighted to share this app with you. I do not have anything physical to share with you, but we have something on the App Store, and I will look forward to come and shaking your hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nandini. Thank you, dignitaries. Next, I call upon UNESCO MGIP Director, Professor Ananta Dweerappa, to enlighten us with his tech talk. The topic for his talk is Predators and Nurturers. Ananta has spent over 33 years as a science policy trendsetter. He took the position as the inaugural director of UNESCO MGIP in 2014 and has played a pivotal role in positioning the institute as one of the leading research institutes for education. He firmly believes in the power of science and brings in the latest researches from the discipline for building peaceful and sustainable societies. He is a fellow of TWAS and a fellow of World Academy of Arts and Sciences. Ladies and gentlemen, with a huge round of applause, please welcome UNESCO MGIP Director Ananta Dweerappa.
All right, can everybody can hear me. I always would have liked to have met Nandini much earlier in my life because she diagnosed me with dyslexia about a year and a half ago. And I could have explained to my parents why I was. And I would have not had all that scolding for doing poorly in maths and all the other stuff. But the good thing is I found the right options. I was provided certain tools that I was able to get to where I am right now. And then she did another thing which I wasn't too happy about. She told my wife that this is hereditary. And that explains why my son was diagnosed with acute dyslexia very early on. Mine is only about 10, 15%, but he's in the extreme case. And so immediately the wife said, figures why he's had that. It's the father as usual. But today, I want to focus the talk on a stakeholder that we have pretty much ignored in our discussions. We take the stakeholder for granted. We take this stakeholder to somebody who we think is the best for them. And that stakeholder I'm talking about is the student. Across the whole range of age, but I want to focus on the child. And we are all parents. Today's talk was inspired by my own experience in school, but really going into this field, and I excuse myself, I apologize that I was trained as an economist, but I moved into education after seeing what my children have gone through, which seems to be very similar to what I've gone through. It has not changed. So we need to really look and keep them at the heart of our discussions over the next 3 days. Let's not forget the child. And so, that's a scary photo. Let me get that one out. That's what I do for my hobby. This is not working. So, as they get the technology done, it always happens in a technology conference. The technology doesn't work. But some recent statistics that came out from WHO are very disturbing. The trend, and the Honorable Minister Javadekar Prakash had already alluded, the CM also has suggested of a happiness society. That's his goal. For India, and I was really shocked that 25% of children between the ages of 13 and 15 have some form of depression. And these are the only reported ones. And we know many of us have this as a stigma, so we don't report that. So the real numbers could be much higher. And of course, everybody knows suicides are something that we really have to contend on. That's been increasing as well. The second disturbing trend is this whole notion of this rising sense of intolerance. We are not
Nara Chandrababu నుంచి ఎవరో వచ్చి మాకు కొంచెం ఫోటోలు తీయించుకోవాలి ఇబ్బంది పెడతా ఉంటే
the whole option of
బాధపడుతున్నారు మాకు ఫోటోలు తీయించుకోవట్లేదంటే నేను ఒకటే చెప్తా ఉన్నాను మీ అందరికీ నా విన్నపం.
And I don't like tolerance. I don't think we should go for tolerance.
నా సమయం అంతా
tolerating you.
ఫోటోలు తీయించుకోవడానికి
bound by maybe the institutions that are
నేను మీకు అండగా ఉండేవాడిని.
నేను understanding and respect. And that's where we really need to focus on. Then the third, it's working. We have some really global wicked problems, climate change, migration. Future generations to handle, especially climate change.
సత్యాన్ని నమ్మినవాడిని ధర్మాన్ని నమ్మినవాడిని నేను ఒకటే నమ్ముతాను ముగింపు మాటలుగా.
And they need the kind of tools.
నువ్వు ధర్మాన్ని రక్షిస్తే ధర్మం నేను రక్షిస్తాను. నన్ను ధర్మమే రక్షిస్తాడు.
And then the fourth one, which is really problematic.
ఇంత అపూర్వమైన అవకాశం ఇచ్చిన పెద్దలందరికీ పార్టీలో జాయిన్ అయిన వెంకటేష్ బాబు గారికి
As an economist, I couldn't put public good because education does not fit within the definitions of what a public good is. So I use social. But it has social good. It is something that we have to offer to every. And SDG 4 talks about it, inclusive, equitable, quality education for all. So it's there. How do we do it? Now I want to talk a little bit about
ఐక్యతతో నేను సమాజం
I had peanuts in my hands. I was thinking
నడుస్తూ ఉంటే నేను ఇప్పటి నుంచి సంవత్సరాల నుంచి వింటా ఉంటే ఏ రోజు కూడా నేను
But these are some of the things that came out from our 2015 Youth Speak survey that we did, global. And this is to support that second, the rising level of intolerance, understanding. Some of them are quite scary. Fixed gender roles for men bring stability to society. In times of insecurity, you need to use force. This is the trend that we are seeing today. So the two main lessons, what we did was we did education for peace and sustainable. That's our mandate. What we find is that what we have right now is not working. It has had very little impact. Because most of those respondents actually said they have had some exposure to education for sustainable development, education for peace, education for human rights, and yet all the responses went orthogonal to what they should have been taught. Now, the good news is that they are empathetic by nature. The neuroscientists here will already have something sparkling in their heads because they know where I'm going towards with this. But we are empathetic by nature, so there is hope. The bad news, so I'm going to go bad news, good news, bad news, good news. The bad news is our education system. This regimented and instrumentalist by nature was a result of a one-year review that the MGIP took of 22 countries in the Asia-Pacific region. And the final result that we came is that most of the policies, curriculums, and teacher training, all three basically related to a regimented and instrumentalist by nature. So don't question rote memorization. How many of the children are here? They will all sort of say, hey, that makes sense. Material wealth and prosperity as a key goal. Education is static. It doesn't really move. It has to be dynamic. It has to have feedbacks. It doesn't. One size fits all. Competitive pitching against each other. I remember when I used to bring my report card, the first thing, so I'm very happy, I said, hey, I got 80% in my maths. I'm just pulling a fast one. It was much lower, but I don't want to tell you what that was. So I had 80% in my maths. And the first thing my mother asked me is, so who was the highest? So it's about pitting against each other. So it's like you got to get, instead of saying, hey, I had 40% in the previous exam, I got now 80%, I've improved. But that was not the objective. So it kind of creates this that inner person in there to compete against the other. And I'm going to shock you with a statement later on. And in the standard assessments, exams, the fact that you have an exam has already defeated you because you're so anxious before the exam that you don't have this peace of mind to go in there and do what you need to do. It's this exam mentality is causing us so much of stress. It's actually one of the primary factors for that depression and anxiety. And teachers know it all. I think the Chief Minister alluded to that one earlier in his speech. The kids, while the teacher is saying something, the kids are already Googling it and sort of saying, hey, that's wrong. Right? And then they sort of say, you just said something which is wrong. And if you get a so-called traditional teacher, you have to duck the chalkboard that comes at you. But I think these days that's illegal. But during my days, yes, it was. So I want you to sort of look at this very carefully because the objective is human capital and human flourishing as an externality. And so when you see a lot of this focus on emotional intelligence today, which has been pushed by a lot of companies, corporations, World Economic Forum, the focus is still on human capital. But hopefully by this socio-emotional learning, you increase productivity of that person. And it still doesn't address the issue of depression that we talked about, that I alluded earlier. So the reality is that externality is negative. It actually creates predatorial qualities. So this statement that I've made a couple of times and I still stand by it, that our education system is one of the best predatorial training camps that we have. It creates this to do better than the other one. It's always a competitive spirit. So we need a new approach, one based on science and evidence. And we had yesterday a discussion at the high-level policy forum, and I was happy to see that many of the members there, delegations from countries as well as experts, agreed to sort of say that many of the present dominant education systems are not supported by the best findings from the neurosciences. The good news is there's hope, but we need to train the brain. It doesn't come naturally. We got to, as I said, we are empathetic by nature, but you got to train those neurons. They're sitting there, don't use it, you lose it. So you got to train. At MGIP, we call it firing the Gandhi neurons. We wish we had coined the word, but it was actually termed by the neuroscientist at UC San Diego, if I'm not mistaken, V.C. Ramachandran, the neuroscientist, the phantom limbs neuroscientist. He called it Gandhi neurons. We think we should call it firing Gandhi neurons because you need to create the circuits, and it's just not a single neuron. So that's what we're creating, those neural circuits between the thinking brain and the emotional brain. So we have the science. This is not so much of speculation. We have the science. We still need to do more work, but then scientists always want to do more work. I think we have enough to start that process. So the facts, the brain is key to learning. Well, that's no-brainer. I wanted a laugh there. I thought it was The brain is a social brain because it has a rational, but it also has an emotional. We have kind of pushed that emotional part away. We're just so focused on building that rational part. And then the whole rationality has been dumped because I'm not sure how many of you read that book, Predictably Irrational, by Dan Ariely. We're not rational. And the reason we're not rational is because of that emotional. It plays a huge role in our decision-making and the way we behave. And then third thing is neuroplasticity is key. It's that whole connections. And the good news is, old people like me still have neuroplasticity. So there is hope. The young ones are much more elastic. The older ones are less, but it's not gone. So we can train. And the word you're keeping here is training that brain, linking that emotional to the rational. So this is, as a scientist, I had to keep this hypothesis and the propositions. So the hypothesis is emotionally, this is what we want. An emotionally resilient person is a person who is high well-being, and the externality is a productive individual. So I flipped it. I'm no longer focusing on the human as a productive. I'm looking at the human as a flourishing person with productivity as an externality. And the science says that works. A lot of studies in California and other parts of the world where they have included mindfulness, empathy training, they see academic success improve significantly. But the focus is not on that academic success, it's about the person. You address the stress values. You address the depression directly. So the proposition one is a whole brain approach necessary to produce an emotionally and intellectual resilient. Education systems need to adapt, and the early findings is we are there. We need to scale it up, and that's what we are here in this conference. So it's from predators to nurturers. That's the title which I did not want to put at the front, but I put it in bit. So the time is right. The internet has broken the information barrier. Everybody has sort of said, there's no need for textbooks. Just go to Google. But what we need to teach the kids is how you search for that news, because there's so much of fake news. There's so much of news so you need to know how to search that. That's a different skill. We don't teach that. The internet allows coordination connection across learners. We did this really well where we linked 5 schools across the world, had a discussion on migration among people from so different cultures, one from the US, Midwest in the US, one from Malaysia, one from India. And you should see the kind of discussion that was going on and how they change their perspectives. Internet allows freedom of choice. Agency is important. Here the whole notion is agency to this child, the choice. And that's something that the internet allows. And then the propensity to harvest, this is the AI. This is something that we haven't, it's untapped, but the potential is huge. So here's what I want you to imagine. A child who learns by playing games, advances at his or her own pace. I wish I had a game. I go in, I play the game. Yes, I advance. You pass your exam. Wouldn't that be great? Instead of then going for a 1 hour or a 3-hour exam, all focus on the exams, you play the game on a daily basis, and as you advance, means you have learned. If you don't, you go back. You continue working at that. So, and failure is purely seen as learning. The best way to learn is to fail. Multisensory, there's enough science to show that kids learn through different senses. Some are visual, some are more audio, some are text. So a combination, digital allows that. I don't read any more text books, printed books. I've gone completely digital because I can make notes, I can pull them out, I can compile them, synthesize them. And then now the latest ones, I can even play a game within the book. We got to communicate. We got to communicate across cultures. We can't always bring kids from the US to India to talk to somebody from Sri Lanka, Malaysia. We need to communicate. And the only way to communicate and dialogue at a cost-efficient way is through the net, through digital means. Can you imagine a child who co-creates curriculum with the teachers? By the time they finish the curriculum, you're finished. You're studied. I'm not sure what the teachers would say about that. And this is where we are really going in the next few years, where a child has a personal bot, which helps the child, drawing from the millions of experiences. So I'm talking about AI here. I'm talking about a platform which is able to harness all that data. So it's a vision, but I think it's possible, and I think we should start building it. So what do we do about it? So what we had done in MGIP is develop an initial platform. We don't intend to keep it. It's completely open. We want the developers to be part of the community. We want content developers to be part of the community. And we want the children to be part of the community. Because some of the best feedback we have had when we have been building on this is from the children. When we go to the schools and we present it, the amount of feedback that we got to improve it was so significant. And good suggestions. So with that, I'm going to ask my colleagues to welcome to the world of Kai.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is often said that necessity is the mother of all the inventions. But we didn't need to fly. We didn't need to go to the moon. Some of the greatest inventions of our times have come from a different set of inspiration, our imagination. And today, we are imagining the way you teach in your classrooms, the way you teach on a digital platform, and the way you and we, all of us, learn digitally. Today, we are reimagining the education system which is digital through our platform called Collective Human Intelligence, CHI. We knew that the traditional system had its own problems, but we also knew that it had its own benefits. We took the best part of it, merged with how we play games, both offline and online, and took the features from them to create a playground for learners and creators. So quickly, I want to show you a demo as well, and then we run through these slides as well. So traditionally, you have these courses that you are teaching in your classrooms,